Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next episode for Practice Unlocked. My name is Azhar Hirani, and I have two incredible guests here. They're medical students about to graduate in May. And so I have Mr. Jorge here.
Hi, thank you.
And then I have Ms. Sidra here. So let's begin. I want to go over, kind of give me you guys' background, what you guys do. I know you guys are about to enter residency programs. I know you guys advocate for a lot of things as well, things you guys have achieved, go into things like what it took to match your residency programs, what do you guys plan on doing afterwards, things like private practices, group practices, anything planned for that, cost of medical school. Did you guys do anything creative to kind of mitigate that, things like that? So welcome.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for having us.
Do you want to go first?
I'll tag you after. So, hi everybody, I'm Jorge Perdomo. I come from Miami, Florida. I studied originally in Atlanta, Georgia. I went to Georgia Tech, did biomedical engineering, and then I found my way in medicine, going to Burrell College of Osteopathic Medicine over in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And since then, Sidra and I are both fourth-year medical students. In my career at the school, I founded our Latin Medical Student Association chapter, introduced a medical Spanish pilot program to kind of get our students to work with our Spanish-speaking students and develop their skills in that department, because being in Las Cruces, New Mexico, a lot of places in New Mexico as well as Texas, Arizona, you have a lot of border communities, you have a high population of Spanish-speaking patients. Some of them, that's their only proficient language. And so we tackled that as a need, almost like a social determinant of health that would significantly impact our delivery of healthcare and how patients would perceive the information that they're receiving and how they would comply with either medications or recommendations that they would receive from physicians. So that was a big thing that I worked on at school. My other kind of partner project was with Sidra. She led this nonprofit that developed PPE, so personal protective equipment, during the pandemic, and I'll let her speak a bit more about that. One last thing is I got accepted into my residency program over at Naval Medical Center Portsmouth. That's over in Virginia. I am a military student, so
which we're going to get into.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that, and we could talk about funding and some of those other elements after. Yeah, I'll let Sidra give me that.
So I also am graduating soon. Very excited about that. I'm originally from Roswell, New Mexico. My father is a general surgeon, so as much as I didn't want to admit it as a kid, he definitely influenced my decision, from going into medicine. We lived in very small rural communities, so just seeing the impact he made, with our community, was just what inspired me to want the same for myself. So after I graduated from high school, I went to UC Davis in California and finished Bachelor's of Science in Neurobiology, Physiology, and Behavior. And then I didn't feel like my grades were where they needed to be, and I just had some stressors during undergrad. So I actually did a post-baccalaureate program, which is a one-year program to kind of help me get into med school, actually at the med school I'm at now. Yes. And then right before I started med school, I actually taught 8th grade, which was a very interesting experience. Yes. So then when we got into medical school, since I had taught 8th grade, in that community in Las Cruces, I really wanted to keep that going, and I kind of felt like I had a pulse on the community. And so I worked with some of the high school students there, and we worked on different basically diversity topics, and we did a diversity series with them about equity and inclusion. I was able to also have them come to our school so they could not that they had to do medicine, but at least see people that look like them, that are younger than their normal teachers, and get inspired to continue to go into college. A lot of those were first generation college students, so it was very exciting to work with a group like that. And then we also were able to fundraise and get like $2,000 to give them a scholarship as well.
Wow.
Yeah. After that, COVID kind of hit. So like Jorge was saying, we started a nonprofit called Protect NM. And in that, kind of our goal was to advocate and create, collect donations of PPE. So things like masks, hand sanitizer. We actually at one point had over, I think, 30,000 donations for our organization, which was really great. And so we actually gave those items to different communities. Like, for example, in New Mexico, we have a lot of communities that don't even have running water.
Wow.
So being able to donate like thousands and thousands of gallons or hundreds of gallons to those communities was really meaningful to us.
Amazing.
But yeah, after that, another thing that I'm really interested in is advocacy. And so I'm part of Student Osteopathic Medical Association. And through that, I've been able to advocate to kind of like the people in charge of medical education to make more equitable opportunities for all medical students on the DO and MD side, and also just for patients in general.
I mean, you started that chapter, correct?
So
in your school?
I actually didn't start that chapter, but now I serve nationally as the vice president and the speaker of the House for that organization.
Amazing.
Yeah, so it's been really cool.
Are you going to continue doing that as well, like post-graduation?
Absolutely.
Or does the term stop usually?
Oh,
Is it
gotcha.
generally, no, I'm asking you,
Yeah.
is it like a 2-year term, 1-year term, or until someone replaces you?
So that is a 1-year term. So we get voted, like the entire House or all the delegates, which is basically 2 people from every osteopathic medical school, vote on like who is going to be on the executive board. So that happens in October, and then my replacement takes over like in the next few weeks in April in DC, where our next conference is. But kind of stemming into my next plans, I am doing a residency in OBGYN at Virtua Health in New Jersey. I'm really excited.
Well, congrats.
Thank you so much. But I think a lot of the reason I did OB is because of the advocacy work and things that I got to encounter and work on during medical school.
Great. So I know you're going to go into the OB-GYN residency program, and then you're going into the internal medicine. And I know both of you guys, the paths you guys are taking, it's essentially very wide open of what you want to do post-residency, because I believe internal medicine doctors can also do family practice, correct?
Correct. So you can focus on outpatient or family practice, or
Right.
you could focus on being a hospitalist and
Yep.
inpatient.
Yep.
It also opens up opportunities for subspecialties, so fellowships and
Exactly.
cardiology, nephrology, gastroenterology, you name it.
Exactly. Yeah, and also for OB-GYN as well, you can be, a lot of OB-GYNs can, turn into family doctors as well, correct?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, OB is very broad. A lot of women, when they go to their OB, naturally it just becomes that they become their primary doctor. But in terms of the variety of things in OB, you have all the way from delivering your baby, with a normal delivery, or if you have, a high-risk pregnancy, that's a completely different fellowship. And then the GYN side of it, there's so many different fellowships in that, whether it be like cancer portions of GYN or urinary incontinence, etc.
Fantastic. So I know you both took kind of, I don't even want to say like gap year, or is that considered a gap year prior to going to, medical school kind of? And the reason I ask this question is I know a lot of, like you said that your grades towards the end of your high school, that you didn't think that you were confident enough, or you didn't think you had enough grades to kind of get into the medical school. And I don't know your situation, but do describe like, it's not a taboo, it's okay to do so. Take that time off to kind of prep, or even decide if you want to go to medical school or not. So I'll let you guys, kind of take the stage for this one.
I can go first because I kind of hinted at it, but so I think when you're in undergrad, you're like, I have to do all of this at one time and finish everything so fast, but it really is a marathon. It's absolutely not a sprint.
Right.
Like my first gap year was to improve my application. In undergrad, I feel like I kind of had a really hard time adjusting from New Mexico, which is 50th in public education, to going to like a top university, being very far from family. So I think in order to help kind of buffer the grades that I had or the situation that, I had to overcome, that was kind of my reason of why I decided to do a post-bac program. The median age of a medical student is like 26.
Oh, wow.
So you graduate at like 21, 22?
21, 22.
So it really, people take their time. It's just sometimes I think when we're that young, we get tunnel vision, but it's okay to kind of take your time and really figure out what the best path is for you.
I will wholeheartedly and full send agree that I did not have the best credentials coming into medical school. So I also took gap years, right, plural, doing a post-bac in Miami, and then I spent a year working and gaining essentially resources or funds to apply to the process, because that's another thing we haven't talked about is interviewing and visiting schools. All those things cost money. Applications cost a lot.
Or you can't just do a Zoom call. You have to go.
Well, at least,
now.
now.
Now they've switched things up a bit.
Yeah.
But when we were applying, that usually entailed going to travel. I remember, lying or taking my vacation at work, going hey, I have something coming up, and I'm en route to go to a school to transition out of that position that I was currently in, and people work through that, and it's tough. And as far as cognitive dissonance, where you're living two lives, right? But you're trying to, it's a means to an end. And
Makes sense.
My story is that I wasn't pre-med or pre-health when I began undergraduate. That's of course, the track that students take when they're developing their curriculum and taking courses necessary to apply to medical school. You need a lot of prerequisites. I didn't have a lot of those. I was actually doing a computer science minor of all things. So I've done cybersecurity, AI stuff, and a plethora of different subtopics that are now becoming more related to medicine.
Yep.
I'm thankful for. I think that's a step in the right direction. But I needed that year of more traditional pre-medical courses to align my skills and my foundation prior to jumping into medical school.
What made you want to jump in?
Oh yeah, that's that's a good story. So, my mom had she was kind of going through her own battles with as far as her health, and one of those summers I generally, I worked several jobs during undergrad, and I kind of lined up a remote internship where I can develop a computer program, an app, essentially, from my home or wherever I am, and then just check in with my professor, my principal investigator, several times a week. And I kind of foresaw that she would have a rough kind of development that summer. So I was with her a lot in the hospital, oftentimes coding on my computer. And when I saw those hospitalists, those surgeons come in, I had to be honest with myself. I wanted to play a role in delivering health, but at the time, I found myself to be too removed from that kind of end product.
Right.
So I saw the physicians being more so the deliverers of those products, right? They're the ones that walk in with those bag of tricks, and they pull out their medication, their product, their device, and help the patient. And what I've been taught as biomedical engineers, we provide that bag of tricks for the doc, right? So similarly to I would say to pharmacology, it's providing medications, right? So I a little selfishly decided to be implanted in that position. And
Amazing.
I had exposure actually working with key opinion leaders, so physicians that provided user needs and design input to teams of engineers, myself being a part of that team.
Right.
And I saw this is the best way to kind of get the best of both worlds, where you can consult for future development of
Was going to ask you.
technology, while also tending to your patients and giving personal fulfillment.
So you think post-residency you would be involved in some sort of technology? Because I know AI is huge right now. It's not necessarily that they teach you AI in medical school because they want to keep it very medical. But, still AI plays a huge role in on the medicine side. It's probably going to get the most positive benefit for humanity for kind of involving, technology, AI with medical. So do you see yourself being involved in that, like post residency, and in what capacity are you already thinking of it? But it may change. I mean, after residency, things probably have gotten so advanced till then.
I don't want to count my chicks before they hatch. I feel like we're entering a phase where we're working again on foundations as like residents, trying to make sure that we're good doctors first, and then
Very nice.
we can apply everything thereafter. But I certainly daydream and foresee a future where I'll either, consult to those degrees and work with teams that are trying to implement things, administrate those developments and those new technologies. I'm excited for it, and I agree with you. There's a lot of space that can use that to benefit everything. So
Yeah. Very nice. And in terms of like, I know during the years that, prior to joining medical school, like you guys mentioned cost, and I know medical school costs a lot. I mean, you already have your college, like the normal undergrad program that you guys went through that already costs money. And then you go through medical school and that just adds up. So I know taking a gap year, I'm sure that helped mitigate a lot of the finances, but is there other avenues? Let's see if you don't take a gap year. Is there other avenues that future aspiring students can possibly kind of tap into? Like any programs that you guys know of that you guys probably took advantage of that you guys can share?
I think for me, it's just been looking into a lot of scholarships. Like sometimes you'll be very surprised, like finding a scholarship. Like my local hospital in where I'm from in Roswell, I guess has been having this scholarship for a while, and I didn't find out about it until like a few years ago. So
Wow.
I think sometimes you just need to ask the people around you, and just, I guess, don't be afraid to ask those questions, because a lot of the time, especially as students, I feel like we really like are embarrassed to talk about those things or feel like
Yeah, I can
very
see that.
shy. Yeah. But I think if you talk to your peers or things like that, to figure out what is the best route for you. But for example, sometimes as a student, like there's a lot of scholarships involved. So for example, the American Osteopathic Foundation had a few scholarships for people that worked in COVID, and you had to be nominated to do it. And I think sometimes a lot of students feel embarrassed to ask someone to nominate them for things. But I was like, there's $1,000 scholarship. Like I'm going to ask my, advisor or something to nominate me. And you'd be very shocked at how many things that sometimes you have to open the door for yourself, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Right.
So for me, that's kind of been my way of trying to help mitigate, some of those costs.
Is there like a website people can go to as well to research, or any resources that you use to kind of find out what these resources are?
So, like when you're in medical school, if you're an osteopathic student, the AOF, so American Osteopathic Foundation, has a bunch of scholarships that run throughout the year. And then SOMA Foundation, Student Osteopathic Medical Association Foundation, has scholarships for students. So we essentially, within the SOMA Foundation, raise money to help students. So I think those are some major ones. And then on the flip side, for MD students and for osteopathic students, the AMA, so American Medical Association, they have a foundation as well, where they have some scholarships.
And is it merit based, or just you could apply, get nominated?
So some are merit, some are like leadership. I'm trying to think what other ones.
some are based strictly on socioeconomic status.
Yes.
Yes. So if you're needs based,
Okay.
and you're representative of a certain demographic or from a certain area, they can help you out.
Amazing.
You mentioned Latin Medical Student Association. That's the organization I worked with. LMSA, Student National Medical Association, SMA. These student orgs have, I would say, feeder patterns, or like undergraduate partner organizations. So if students get kind of connected through those orgs at their universities, they should be able to disseminate a lot of those opportunities for them. So maybe, I don't know, MAPS is one.
Yeah, definitely. Which is like medical, Minority Association of Pre-Medical Students. So they also have their own like scholarships. And honestly, if you become a member of these organizations, they just routinely, like every week, send out opportunities for scholarships or other opportunities that students can take advantage of. But something else I will add that I feel like I didn't know when I was younger is like being an independent from your parents really, makes a huge difference. So when you turn 26, that essentially like
You're not
opens-
dependent on their tax return, like
Yes.
even if you would like to be, or
Yeah, so then that affects what scholarships and things, financial aid and things like that you can fully
They could
take
be eligible
advantage.
for. Okay,
Mhm,
gotcha.
exactly.
Very nice. So in terms of like, if you had to put like a number down, or it could be a range, not necessarily what you guys paid for, like how much would a medical, like the whole schooling process, the boarding, the lodging, everything, how much would that, because I've seen a lot of physicians that still today on their personal financial statement, I see 250,000 of student loans, and they've already been in practice for about 5 years now, but they're slowly paying it off, which is a good thing about student loans. Is usually they're a longer period. There's a lot more flexibility. There's in terms of terms of paying it back.
Well, and something else I wanted to add is something called the PSLF.
Officer to stand for English.
Yeah, the program essentially where if you are working in like a nonprofit organization or in a rural area, if you're paying I think it's like 120 payments of the minimum amount that they require you to pay. After that, they will forgive your loans fully.
And it's a governmental program?
Yes, and so a lot of my peers and I are taking advantage of that program, and we can talk about this later too. But when we're looking at residencies, that's like a huge thing to look at. Like, when I start my residency, I can start using the PSLF.
Start paying it off. So 120 months is what, 10 years?
Yeah,
10 years?
10 years.
Okay.
And so I can at least get
And
4
knocked out,
years.
4 years knocked out.
Yeah.
And one of the big requirements for that is you need to be working for an organization that's serving the public good. And most residents
Are in a
resident
program,
physicians
yeah.
programs is working at nonprofit hospitals or
Or like a academic institution, basically. Yeah.
On the note, before we get to like estimates, one major program that I feel like I'm a representative of is the HPSP, so the Health Professions Scholarship Program. This is one way a lot of people end up paying for medical school, and it's a commitment to military active duty service. So generally what they end up doing, this is separated between the different branches. As far as I know, I don't think Space Force does any like scholarships yet for students. The Army, Navy, and Air Force, and even Coast Guard, I believe, they've been doing this for decades now, at least over 50 years, where they've been providing all medical school costs as well as like a base stipend for living expenses and food for their students. Most people don't have an issue kind of budgeting with that. I've been using some of that income to even pay off like undergraduate loans. So that's it's better. It helps me situate myself financially. Of course, what they give you in money, you pay in time. So generally, like my residency program is a length of 3 years. The minimum payment you have to do is 4 years of active duty service. Why? Because medical school is 4 years.
Right.
You can pay back the time. You have to pay back the time for medical school as well as the time for residency. But those two payback periods could be concurrent.
Okay.
So as I'm serving after residency, I'm paying off for both medical school and residency at the same time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Another side benefit, or I guess as far as resources are concerned, a lot of physicians and physicians in training, which will soon be, refer to the white coat investor as like this financial personal management Bible for physicians. And the author was an HPSP scholar. So I believe his specialty is emergency medicine, and he talks about how this is an option for folks who want this kind of lifestyle or want to experiment with being a medical officer to a certain capacity and then kind of going back to civilian life. So I think it offers benefits, but ultimately, like if you play it right, you can pay it off in 10 years using PSLF. You could pay it off in 5 years. A lot of physicians have this lifestyle creep issue where they don't. It's easy for us to speak about it because we're still students. We don't, we don't see big ticket items and say, yeah, we could cash that in.
Right.
A lot of docs, when they receive that first paycheck, it's maybe oftentimes their first real position, or maybe they
There's a huge difference in your first doctor paycheck compared to your residency.
and if a lot of us are lifelong students, right? We haven't worked any job. We've had the benefit in our gap years to work in positions, so at least some level of personal management is present. But some kids that are coming out straight out of undergraduate don't have that same patience or virtue kind of developed. And so I think, even if you don't seek out these scholarships, it's more than reasonable where people can pay off their loans. And I think a big thing, transitioning to the kind of estimated cost of.
Well, can I?
Oh yeah, go for it.
So, also another thing I forgot. I know, always So another way to make a little bit of money during medical school is to be a tutor for your school. So that was something I actually did. And the other day I was doing it and I realized that I'm getting paid more per hour being a tutor than I will as a resident, which is crazy, but that's another conversation.
Yeah, and you could also stack people up. You don't have to do one-on-one tutoring, I'm sure.
So our school kind of organizes it. There's a few ways. So for example, at my school, or our school, you can be an anatomy TA. So we have the dissections of the cadavers. And so you actually teach the groups as they go through and see each cross-section of the body. Or you can do one-on-one tutoring, or my favorite are doing the big group tutorings. Right. So you get time.
You get paid more.
Well, you actually get paid the same, but the prep, you get paid to prep your slides or whatever you decide. So I guess technically you get paid more, but it's a little more time.
These are brilliant ways where you can, during medical school to kind of earn extra dollars, pick up these jobs here and there to kind of supplement into the cost of going to medical school. Because sure, in terms of having such an hectic schedule, I'm sure medical school for you guys in terms of time was crazy, because there's schooling, there's the job, and there's the practicals that come with it. At that age, you've already entered into adult life, where you see your friends getting married, and baby showers are coming through, and travel, and so it can get very tough. So what did you guys do to kind of help make your schedule sufficient, or anything you guys can suggest? Maybe any mistakes you guys made, didn't have a routine, didn't understand the kind of if you were able to come up with certain schedules that work for you guys, or there's certain flexibilities that you could do during medical school that people don't take advantage of. Any suggestions on that?
You want me to go first?
I can go first for this one.
Okay.
I think it depends on what stage in medical education you're in. The 4 years are divided mainly into two sections: your preclinical years, first and second year, and your clinical years, third and fourth year. As you've discussed, you have practicals throughout. First and second year, it's a bit more divided because you're in the traditional college setting where you have lectures, labs, some practicals. But the setup is more attuned to that undergraduate setup. So it's at what time of the day do you study and absorb information the best? What method do you absorb this information the best? Is it visual? Is it audio? Is it a combination? Are you a concept mapper? These are all mainly techniques. As far as time management goes, similarly to how our courses will be scheduled. You have histology regarding to the cardiovascular system from 8 to 9.
Right.
Maybe you should also time block your study period.
So do you guys get to choose? In university, you get to choose your timings.
Oh,
There's
no.
like 10 courses of English in certain times.
So we just sit in one lecture hall, and instead of the students moving, the lecturer moves.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll put an asterisk on that, because with COVID, something that's been happening more and more frequently that I think most schools have adopted is they record lectures. So there are individuals. Yeah, I'm not one of those top participants in lectures. I don't sit in that splash zone where you receive the the spray from your lecture.
Yeah.
And I also don't sit in the back knowing absolutely everything. I'm in the middle.
If any professors you would like to call out?
They shall remember me. But Sidra and I, we would sit together in lecture, and we would keep each other engaged in the topic at hand.
Right.
So we sat in that kind of like comfortable huddle of penguins that kind of sat in the middle for like
Right in the middle.
tension.
Right.
But some individuals that never participated or think that professor's speaking too slow, which there are certainly people that do that,
Right.
they would sit at home, pull up the recording at 1.2 for whatever reason.
1.25 speed and
Oh,
kind of listen to
2 speed for sure.
1.75 speed times, 3 times,
Oh,
you name it.
There was definitely a professor that I had to 3 times the speed.
Really?
He talked very slow.
So they covet. Because pre-reading is an interesting component that I feel like a lot of professors say, look at the material prior, but when you're drinking out of a fire hose of knowledge that is medical education, there's only so much pre-reading that you can do
Right.
prior to receiving a lecture. So a lot of people find it more useful to look through whatever resources that they're familiar with consulting, and then viewing those lectures at their whatever time that they want, while they're eating, while they're doing something, and then they just stay at home. And that's been increasing in frequency because of COVID. So
Yeah, and I think going back to the analogy of the fire hose, I think as the faster that you kind of tell yourself or allow yourself to realize you can't complete everything. You can't do every optional reading, even sometimes the required reading that they, ask of you to do.
Right.
But as long as you kind of recognize, okay, I have to just try to do the best I can and be the most efficient studier. And in med school land, we have something called high yield, which is essentially things that are asked a lot. And later on, it makes sense because when you move to 3rd and 4th year, you realize there's a reason it's high yield. It's because it shows up a lot, or maybe it actually doesn't show up a lot, but it's just commonly tested for whatever reason. But I think something I always like to tell students that are a few years younger than me is kind of make what your priorities are. Mine was I had to sleep 8 hours. That was a requirement. Eating well, but obviously during COVID that was really hard, and working out was also kind of difficult during COVID. But as long as those three things were happening, it didn't matter how much studying I was going to get done. But naturally, if I'm taking care of my body and my mind, those things were able to get done and in a more efficient way.
Consistent way. So in terms of in medical school, do you guys get graded the way universities do it, hey, 70, 75?
So it's kind of
80,
changing. A lot of it's becoming pass fail, and that's been for kind of the mental health of students, which is great on one hand because, we're talking about, it's just so much material. Students will not sleep to get through all of it.
And I'm sure that's difficult for a lot of medical students. I mean, medical students typically, a high percentile of them have been their top of their class growing up since grade school. So doing the just the pass and fail, I don't know if it'll work for them, but I know majority of the people, I know for me it would have worked. Well, I stumbled upon I barely passed university. But that didn't make me any less smart than the others that
Absolutely, yeah.
were getting
you're more efficient. You got it done.
Yeah, you got it done.
Barely. Trust me, I was praying my last class.
But sometimes it's you have testing anxiety or something happens in life, and that's the hard thing about med school is people you have to be on all the time in med school. If you are sick one day and you decide I'm going to be lazy this day, you kind of screw yourself over. Really? For that block or that week or whatever. It's very hard to combat. The students that I see that are killing it at the top of our class, or the people that every day that discipline, they just had it no matter what was going on in their life. And but that doesn't mean that they're going to be a better physician than someone who had a personal thing happen in their family and couldn't learn that one chapter that we went over that day and they missed it. So
to piggyback off of everything that you're mentioning about triaging your time, triaging your efforts, right? The lists that you were kind of moving towards, where you list the priorities of topics that you have to touch upon, hit them. What I was mentioning about time blocking, set yourself an endpoint. At 10, it's over. I am not going to study anymore. And you learn that eventually after trying to study until 2 or 3 a.m. and then you're writing down notes and you start writing gibberish or you start scribbling or what have you. You're physically, you have evidence of yourself not retaining anything. So go to sleep. That's just evidence-based. And we use that word a lot in medicine, right?
Right.
Something we use a lot is like the Pomodoro technique, right? Like give yourself 25 minutes of like effective studying and then take that 5-minute walk period where you just get up from your chair, change the scenery, get a cup of coffee, drink water, go to the restroom, reset mentally. That helps a ton. And I think those techniques trickle over because we've only talked about the preclinical side of things, the first 2 years. Talking about the third and fourth year, you are following a work schedule. You're following residents, you're following attendings, you're following clinical hours. So 9 to 5, or if you're in the hospital, you're showing up at 6 a.m. Maybe you're leaving at 8 p.m. You don't know. Usually attendings, preceptors, right, our professors, they operate with so much grace and they understand that you have to study a lot and you're at the point where you're taking exams more often than the residents at least. So they'll send you home early. For those that don't, because oftentimes that's our only experience to that field, we want to stay, we want to see everything play out. You're now in an environment where unlike the first 2 years, you have to triage your time even more operating this business schedule and kind of yourself. Well, from the things that I saw today, anecdotally, how do I absorb this information, right? I've seen this patient today with this disease, with this prognosis.
You guys are seeing real patients?
Yes.
So, okay.
So that's,
And usually medical schools have a school close by or on campus?
So it depends on the school, and this is kind of interesting, just quickly going back to that pass-fail thing too, because it's great in the sense of, mental health, but if you go to a school that's, may not be a recognizable name or something like that, it could kind of almost hinder you because you feel that residencies may not recognize your school's name and it might make it hard for you to get a residency or something like that, and you have to find a different way to make yourself stand out. But a lot of MD schools do have like a hospital attached to them, or like an academic hospital institution. Some of these newer MD schools may not have that, or they're still working on figuring out where their hospital will be, and the majority of DO schools do not have an academic hospital institution, but that means that we get to work like in the community setting, or we
like a community, like a clinic, or like a community hospital?
So both. So it can be like a community clinic for family medicine, for example, and then if you're doing internal medicine when you're inpatient in the hospital, it's going to be like a community hospital.
Amazing. And then now in terms of you said MD and versus DO. So I wanted to ask you guys a question on what made you guys want to do DO versus go to MD school. Is that a student's choice, or usually the school that you get into, that's the path you take? Usually people don't talk a lot about DOs, but like I found out my primary care after years of going to him that he's a DO. So for me, it didn't make a difference. A physician's a physician. But like, did you guys wanted to choose that path, or just the school that you guys got into?
So you actually apply to them separately. Okay. So you kind of have to make that choice going in. For me, I didn't really even know what osteopathic medicine was until maybe my second year of undergraduate. I at that time wasn't even considering it. I was like, oh, I'm going to go to an MD school. Like that's going to happen. Like I'm going to go to medical school at an MD school. And then as I kind of got closer and I had some issues in undergrad, I was kind of looking at my application and I wasn't really 100% sure if I was going to get into a medical school.
Gotcha.
So I sat down with my dad. I remember one day we were sitting down with him.
Who was a general surgeon?
Yes, he was a general surgeon.
Intimidating,
Absolutely. And he was like, you've seen a DO and you don't even realize.
Yeah. Well, I didn't for a year.
Right.
Yeah. And I honestly thought it was he's studying in London or something,
Right.
I didn't even know what a DO meant. So I was like, oh, it's probably international schooling versus an MD in America.
Right. Yeah, people just don't even realize when they see an MD or a DO. Yeah. Probably 95% of the time they don't recognize, that the two letters at the end of your name.
Yeah.
But as soon as I started looking more into it, it was just a great other option. And so another thing that I think students kind of, I guess, consider another option is Caribbean schools.
Yeah.
So
My cousin went there.
yeah.
A lot of people I know have gone there actually.
And you have to go there and bust your butt because you're considered an international medical graduate.
Right.
And so it's almost like another stigma, and it becomes harder to get into residency programs. But recently, about 4 years ago, the MD and DO residency programs merged. And so before it was like, DOs had their own residency programs, and then some DOs would apply to MD programs.
It doesn't make sense. The residency, like if you're a DO or MD, that schooling makes sense, but then when you get into residency, it didn't really make sense. So I'm glad they're combining it or merging it together.
Absolutely, and it benefits U.S. graduated medical students, because.
Like standardized care.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't know. I just feel like it just makes more sense. Like you're saying, you're treating the patient. So why aren't we, I guess, making sure it's all the same or similar curriculums?
In essence, they've been practicing together all these years.
Right.
As well trained together.
Well, even before, there was so much discrimination that there were separate hospitals. Like DOs would work at separate hospitals than MDs. So it's great that everything's integrating, but because of the merger, it's actually making it harder for Caribbean school graduates to find residency.
Oh, wow.
So, sometimes I talk to students and they're like, oh, should I go to Caribbean school or DO? And my personal opinion is go to a DO school. Like if you look at the residency lists, like PGY1 all the way to PGY4, et cetera, and you'll start to see over even the last 4 years, the amount of DOs in various residencies is starting to increase.
What is PG? What does that mean?
Postgraduate.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
PGY1 would be your postgraduate year from graduating from medical school. This is your first year as a resident. So an intern would be your first year postgraduate, so PGY1.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. So that's just, I'm glad you cleared it up because I myself didn't know, and I'm sure a lot of the audience wouldn't know the difference, or if they're wanting to decide, or if there's any certain stigmas involved with it, or but I'm glad you were able to clear that up. Show a different alternative path for a lot of people that were just thinking of medical school, like medical MD school, and then if you're going to end up in the same residency program anyways, right, it wouldn't really make a difference.
And don't get me wrong, there's still stigma. Like it can be harder to get into a program that's been traditionally all MD students from the U.S. getting into those programs.
Right.
But it's slowly, starting to change. It is a little bit trickier because we don't have hospitals within our schools. So you kind of have to be ready to network and put your best foot forward, essentially, because you're going to have to work just a little bit harder to make those connections. And a student that has a home academic hospital connected to their school.
Here, rather than probably adding my opinion to this topic, I would say you're just very qualified on this topic, which is why I'm letting her speak a lot about this. She's the first NBOME liaison and the NBME. So NBOME is National Board of Osteopathic Medical Examination. NBME is the allopathic or MD equivalent National Board of Medical Examination.
Wait, I'm going to fix that. I'm so sorry. It's student, I'm the liaison for the Student Osteopathic Medical Association. But basically what that means is I'm the first student to ever have sat on the National Board of Medical Examiners to advocate for osteopathic medical students.
And so almost like a segue that generally DO students take the same examinations that MD students take, and more. They take the DO equivalents as well as the allopathic or MD exams.
If they choose to.
They don't need them, but traditionally what has been the case is they double up on exams, and that adds an additional cost. So when people are considering applying to MD or DO, that's something that comes into the fold. The other big thing, just to reiterate what Sidra was saying, a lot of MD schools are established and connected with local hospital systems. DO schools oftentimes send their students out. I think it makes the process, it adds a bit more friction where you need to put in a little bit more legwork. You do ultimately get the same education. If anything, you become a better advocate for yourself because there's a lot of these pathways that aren't built in. You need to network for yourself. You need to find your preceptors, establish those connections, those relationships, and then follow through with that education. So,
Makes sense.
a lot of nuances, but
So is there like a cost difference as well, MD school versus DO school, or
I think
I know both cost a lot
Yeah.
in general.
I think
but
it's definitely it's safe to say that most DO schools are private schools.
I think all of them are.
Yeah, all of them are private schools. So generally, if you continue that paradigm with undergraduate or graduate degrees and programs, the private schools are going to cost more than the public.
oh, so DO school would actually cost more.
Yes.
Oh wow.
I mean, there are some MD schools that, start getting towards that price that are private, MD schools.
Right.
But average wise, for sure, DO schools do cost more than MD schools do.
Wow. Now, are you guys planning on? I mean, it's too soon to say, but are you guys planning on doing any like fellowship after residency, or you guys have had enough and you guys are ready to start get your career started afterwards?
Sidra has more to add to this, so I'll be coined. I'm not sure yet. Internal medicine is like, I love medicine, so we'll figure this out one step at a time.
I'm sure he said that when he joined like engineering school.
We're step that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know yet. So I'll let.
So I kind of have an interesting path of like what I was interested in, but there was kind of a period of time where I actually was considering urology over, OBGYN or general surgery.
A lot of people can do both. I know some physicians that are urogyno.
Well, that's what I actually want to do. So that's perfect that you brought that up.
There's a huge need for that because
There
there's a lot
is.
of physicians that are urogyno.
Absolutely. And a lot of women don't talk about like their urinary incontinence issues,
Right.
which is unfortunate because so many of them have.
By the way, a lot of women go to urologists too, right? Or no?
Yes, yeah.
Am I correct? Okay.
So a lot of people think urologists are like the male like equivalent of an OBGYN,
Right.
but that's not the case. Like they also help with kidney stones or
Right.
kidney cancers, bladder cancers. So male and female have those issues. So urologists deal with both. So in terms of the urogynecology, I was just very interested in like urinary incontinence and helping women through those problems. And I always kind of thought I was going to do something more like related to this is an urgent situation and you need like this to save your life, or you need this to make, you feel better. But when I started doing my clinical years, 3rd and 4th year, I kind of realized like I actually like having these discussions about quality of life and meeting the patient with what they're comfortable with. Because a lot of the urogyn issues, it's like quality of life issues. So it's more like how much do they want to do to make that problem better, which is really cool. And another thing that I've been starting to think about is like, what do I want my life to look like? Do I want to be on call all the time? Like, what do I want my clinic hours to look like? And that's kind of another reason
Because of the OB portion of it, or even as a gynecologist or urine, or you're still on call usually. I know a lot of urologists are on call.
Absolutely.
And there's like accidents that happen that you need to do emergent surgery and stuff that you have to rush back to the hospital.
Definitely. But the nice thing about urogyn, or it's also called female pelvic reconstructive surgery, is a lot of those things that physician deals with are quality of life issues, not emergent issues. Also, when you do a procedure on that patient, they're less likely to stay in the hospital, like they'll be outpatient surgeries. So because of that, the quality of life is better. You're really doing clinic 8 to 5, and then
Right.
2 or 3 days out of the week
You're doing surgery.
Exactly.
Right.
Whereas, OB, you're doing L&D like 12-hour shifts either during the day or night, which is not really what I want my life to look like, at least right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm starting like the going into practices or working for someone. These things, it's kind of overlooked in terms of your own planning and thought process. People don't realize physicians work crazy hours. And I'm sure you've seen your father work crazy hours at odd hours, because it's usually not just people think, oh, it's a physician, they just go to the hospital. No, they usually go to the hospital and then usually have an outpatient clinic. If they don't have their own clinic, it's usually a group practice. And then they have other consulting work that they do for your local, let's say, hospice or home health care agency. Or there's so many others, or, there's a legal route people take. They could be an expert testimony, like expert. I mean, there's so many routes.
Absolutely.
Or they can work in technology, because if you're going to do technology in healthcare, you're gonna have to be someone that actually has experience in healthcare, and then
Yeah.
during your, then you can consult other companies and actually what does the medical industry need.
Absolutely.
It's about it's-
And because you're mentioning like, other parts of healthcare that physicians can do without actually, practicing patient care. That's kind of also why I want to do Euroguide, because I feel like it'll kind of give me that time to also continue my advocacy work. And eventually I would love to like work in a medical school and help medical students. So I feel like that lifestyle would allow me to have those other interests outside of, my medical career.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. What about you? I know internal medicine doctors. They're always. I mean, if you take the hospitals route, it's crazy hours.
Right. People like in the internal medicine schedule if it's like on and off, 1 week on, one
Yep.
week off. Cidra's been mentioning being a professor, working in medical school. There's also the academic hospitalist route where when you're not in the hospital per se, you're performing medical research, you're contributing to lectures and curriculum. So that avenue is also made available for internal medicine physicians. Additionally, one of the paths is moving towards health administration. A lot of physicians enjoy working with, a boss who knows what they're going through. And so that's also a path that individuals take. But again, fellowship, I don't know yet.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because I'm sure you're going to be continuing your technology work with it.
Right. There's plenty of, people will do get a master's rather than doing fellowship. Do a PH, do one BA, or continue with their engineering. Like with the surgeon that worked specifically with my mother, got his master's in engineering, right? He did that before medical school, of course, but he implemented that education afterwards as a physician. So, like you said, it's very polymathic.
You're right. Have you guys already thought about because let's go post kind of residency. Like, have you guys already thought of? Do you guys want to be independent? Do you guys want to be part of a group? Do you want to go? Because obviously, it really depends on quality of life. Like, hey, do you want to be an entrepreneur and actually start your own practice? Any paths you guys have already kind of started? It's hard to plan everything because it's like post 4 years from now, but at least an idea that you have. And the reason I'm asking you is so others can start thinking about, you guys may have a creative way that some people have not even thought about. Like, I know physicians that have kind of taken a break after residency and done locums. Where they can kind of work on side projects, make some money, extra money, travel the world around that time. Because by the time usually, physician after residency is already in their 30s. So, any plans you guys have already?
I already know.
I get the visualization you're trying to get us to.
I know.
It's like light at the end of the tunnel before we begin. When you want to do after. I think for me that path has already been selected per se because I have my military service commitment, which is.
By the way, thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you for your support.
Yeah.
But yes, they comparable to locums, but you'll be all around the world.
Amazing. Okay.
Serving and your fellow soldiers, sailors,
Amazing.
Medical officer. Yeah, I just did officer development school, and they emphasize because there's a lot of professionals, a lot of JAGs, so a lot of junior attorney generals or assistant, essentially lawyers for the military are there. Nuclear engineers are there. People with professions that are doing officership. And what's kind of espoused and drilled into you is, I don't need a doctor. I need a medical officer. And how those two things are very different. So after residency, I would be fulfilling that role as a medical officer, which is a doctor,
Right.
but is a naval officer first, right? And that there are collaterals or side duties that one would kind of be responsible for, whether it's making sure that sailors are kind of mentored in this certain pathway, or you're in charge of you're the religious liaison officer, and you have to deal with almost like the HR elements of your fleet doing certain services. So there's a lot of different paths, similar to, I guess, how someone outside of residency would pursue I know there's a position that people can do where they just check notes written by other doctors, and I think it provides a learning opportunity for junior physicians to kind of see how senior physicians do it. And then
Well, you can start doing that after your first year, after your intern year.
Thank God you don't have to look at the handwritten notes anymore.
Yes.
It's on your eyes.
Yeah, for me, I think that path is like set, private and group practice. I think the trend is heading towards groups if
I
you're
see
not
that.
being directly employed by the hospital, just because there's safety in numbers and you can better advocate for yourselves if you have more voting power per se, maybe behind the dollar, as a group.
Makes sense.
Private practice, I see the benefits, but it was easier to do before.
Yeah.
But you had to wear multiple hats, right? You had to be your own manager. You had to be run your own clinic.
Yeah.
Now there's a lot of services that automate those things, and now there's people that specialize and provide those kind of niches.
I hope it doesn't come to a point where you walk into a clinic, they turn the iPad around saying, go ahead and check in. Would you like to add a tip on this? Today's visit, things like that. So, but I'm sure it'll get there. I mean, cost of running a practice is so high. I wouldn't be surprised if literally you walk in and you kind of sign in on an iPad. Say, while you're here, there's really no receptionist that you're talking to.
Well, even now, like with my chart, you check in before on your phone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's basically like that.
Yeah. I didn't even know what a MyChart was until I went to the hospital actually 2 weekends ago for my father's procedure. And I got to learn about it. And I've been in medical from a business side for about 16 years. I didn't even know what my chart was. So all these new things are coming on, and it's like you get to learn so much.
Absolutely.
And the industry has changed completely. And I've seen physicians go from paper charting to the whole stressful situation of mandatory switching to EMR.
Yeah.
And then, I've seen EMRs being sold for $40,000 compared to $300 a month subscription. I've seen, physicians being bought out by hospital practices, a lot of physicians joining kind of multi-specialty groups so they can kind of cross, kind of keep the patient within, it's easier to reach patients so you could discuss if you're in a group practice with a cardiologist, an endocrinologist, and a pain doctor, and let's say that patient sees at least, besides the primary care, they're seeing one of these specialists, it's easier to discuss basically the patient's, chart, what's the best, path forward for them, because a lot of times, patients really suffer sometimes where it's Dr. A needs something from Dr. B, and when you call Dr. B, it's hard to reach them, and then you're trying to coordinate with the hospital, coordinate with the insurance companies, but Dr. B doesn't take the insurance that Dr. A takes. Charts are stuck at one place. It's so much easier if you're in a group practice. So there's so many benefits to what you're telling me where medicine's really going.
Well, and I think one thing that we haven't added is concierge medicine, but I've noticed older patients that do need to go to their primary care pretty regularly like to choose that option because they have full access to, their physician at any time, or, in the confines of whatever their agreement is, but they have easy access to, the physician and their notes itself, which makes it so much easier for the patient. I just can't imagine when you're, towards that retirement age, trying to deal with, my chart, the app on your phone, trying to call and make an appointment. And I feel like even now I try to make a doctor's appointment on the phone and no one even ever answers the phone. So I don't know how people make doctor appointments anymore.
It's extremely the right word I would use is probably frustrating. And I'm glad actually Jorge really pointed out that there's working on the technology of medicine, because I think in terms of technology in every other field has really advanced, but the healthcare technology has not as advanced as quickly. And obviously, there's certain reasons why a lot of the data is really the word unstructured. A lot of the tools that would be created in other businesses have to be very careful because of patient data, because of HIPAA. Like there's a lot of hoops that you have to jump through. There's a lot of companies that own this data, so to coordinate the data from company A to company B without any leakage of because HIPAA, it's so much you have to go through. That there's a tremendous need for technology to really catch up in the medical industry, because it's so archaic to call one person and then they don't have your information that you need. Then you have to wait for person B, and God forbid you have to go to the hospital system, and then that's a maze in itself. And then one test is in building 1, and then 3 blocks down you have your other tests, and then it's very, very complicated. That's the right word. So hopefully with technology, all that will become streamlined. Concierge medicine is huge and is the future, because if a patient just has direct access to the physicians, and 99.99% of the time for a patient, it's almost impossible to be talking to a doctor if they're not in the office. Right now, because of COVID, it really accelerated the whole seeing your patient, through a virtual visit.
Like telemedicine.
So exactly, and that'll speed up the process of having that communication. Now you can actually message the physician's office would get back to you in a timely manner. All these things really didn't exist, and it's still archaic to write, log in and have 50 different passwords for different, specialties that you go through. Log in, try to communicate with them, majority of times there's not even a place to attach something.
Right. And the interesting thing is, I feel like last year, so when we were third years, is kind of when my chart was basically started, or at least was implemented, and people were using it. But seeing physicians, an added layer of frustration about answering those messages from patients was not entertaining, but it was just interesting to see how sometimes these things are forced on. It just adds another burden to the party.
Of course.
But then they find interesting ways, they'll have their RN or MA answer those messages, but then as a patient, you're like, wait, I thought I was talking to the doctor. So
Yeah.
I think there's definitely a lot more.
Are you telling me
things.
I've been communicating with someone else,
Right.
besides my doctor?
Yeah.
But I think to reinforce that, even though that probably was present,
Yeah.
these multiple touches with your physician in terms of conversations are insurmountable to any immediate kind of mitigative procedure or treatment, and those kind of drive up the total costs of healthcare in this country. And
I see that.
those
The redundancies,
Yes.
redundancies are there.
are
I see that.
important, because then that's how you prevent a lot of these conditions rather than mitigate, again, the after effects. And
Yeah.
if you have enough for your Netflix subscription or Spotify subscription, subscribe to your concierge physician, doctor.
And I totally agree.
I mean, I don't want to do concierge medicine, but I just thought it was an interesting thing to bring up.
A nurse saying they do that.
Yeah.
That's their position. They know everything that the physician, or most of what the decisions the physician will make, and then they'll run it through them, and they'll be managing those direct messages through whatever EMR, and it's very helpful for people, especially in rural communities where you can't, maybe you need to see that doctor once a month, but something comes up, and that's your oncologist that you need to be talking to. And of course, just get that quick pass, that quick touch with them virtually, and make sure that you're taking your medications right, or you're exercising the same restraints that you should be.
Good thing is healthcare as a system does recognize that these things need to be dealt with, make it more efficient. So there's obviously, every physician I've spoken to, they're aware of the situation and they empathize with it. And I know a lot of third-party companies are working for a solution. So that's a good thing. And at this point, I have no more questions, and I know throughout this kind of podcast, it's amazing that I know that the future of healthcare professionals, or for patients in the future, is in really good hands. So, it was really interesting for me today to really find out what actually it takes to be a medical student, to go through residency. And you guys are already thinking of what you guys are going to be at post-residency. Which is fantastic. That, as a consumer, it makes me very, very comfortable, like knowing that, you know, the hands of our healthcare system in the future is in the right hands, essentially.
It's very kind.
Thank you.
Yeah, perfect.
Hopefully we don't get jaded in residency, but we'll let you know.
Perfect. Any questions for you guys, or anything you guys would like to say? You know,
I think we touched on mostly everything.
Yeah,
great.
that's it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jorge.
Thank you.
All right. Guys, as you can see, there are many pathways in healthcare, and in the next episode, we're going to explore further these paths as well. So until next time on Practice Unlocked, take care, guys.